Hi. Step one of removing the transmission. This is a Expedition, same thing as an F150, four-wheel drive, 10 speed. Step one, unplug the battery. Step two, get your two 10mm off, pull the shield out of the way. And on the corner, there's going to be a O2 sensor connector. O2 sensor is the brown one right there. Unplug that, get it out of the way. Alright, you ready to go under the vehicle after that. Come back to the cross member. This is the transfer case as a frame of reference, but cross member. Unbolt that. Harness if you have it. Swing that out of the way. I believe it's also got a fastener there. Okay. After you take the harness off the cross member, unbolt the heat shields, 10mm bolts. 1, 2, 3 down in there. And then there's one right here for that heat shield. Right there. Okay. With all that out of the way, go ahead and see it's loose. Okay. Come up to your sway bar in the front. Take the 4 nuts loose. Let the sway bar hang down. Okay. Next thing you're going to want to do is get your drive shafts out, both front and rear. The front one has 10mm fasteners on the front side and the back side. Okay. The back one, you may have a 2-piece drive shaft, but this one's a 1-piece, 4 fasteners in the back, and it slides out of the transfer case. There's the front. Little tip, if they're stuck on the flanges here, go ahead and just tap lightly with a hammer on the flanges, front and or back, and it'll knock it off. And these are 12.12 millimeters, so you'll need a 12.12 socket. Little tip on the rear drive shaft, you're going to have to turn it to get to the bolts, and in order to do that, you're going to run into an issue where it gets stuck on the parking paw when you turn it. So if you have the rotary style shifter inside, you're going to have it on this type of park release here. Take this bolt out next to the transmission cooler lines, move the lever and fasten it back down finger tight with this hole instead of this hole. That'll lift up the parking paw. And if you have the regular style shifter, it's just a shift linkage connected to the linkage on the transmission. Pop the cable off and turn the linkage manually. And do index the rear drive shaft before you take it out and put a mark on it. Make sure you put it on the same spot that you took it off the pinion flange. Alright, with that out of the way, go ahead and get your transmission cooler off. Earlier models may not have this right here, but this one does. So if you need more information on how to remove this, I will show you, but I have a pan removal for a 10R80 video that'll be slower if you need that. So there's a bolt right here. Take that out, take this out, take this out, and take this out. That'll get this cooler loose. Then you're going to need to loosen the lines. 10mm bolt right there. 10mm nut right here. Take those out. Watch my 10-speed pan video if you need more tips on that. Okay. Alright, next go ahead and take your damper off if you have it, off the end of the transfer case. It's got these inverted Torx bolts on it, 3 of them. Same size bolts that are holding the transfer case to the transmission. Get that damper off. The next thing I'm going to recommend you do is disconnect the oxygen sensors. There's 4 of them because you will be pulling the Y pipe off. So just locate each one, follow it up, and disconnect it. I believe the rear one on this side, or it's the front, goes on top of the transmission with the connector. So what I usually do is just, I believe it's the front one, you just unscrew it from the exhaust and let the sensor dangle, It's easier than trying to get up top and disconnecting that. And it makes it easier to reinstall too, because they have little locking clips on the connectors, so it's easier to just take the sensor out. Let me rephrase. Certain models have a O2 sensor connector that goes on top. This Expedition does not. I believe that F150s may have that, certain year models, and it's just easier to pull the sensor out. Okay. Also, when you're disconnecting it, make sure you get the wiring out of any looms that are holding it onto the harness, because you're going to be needing that extra slack when you pull it out, the transmission. Alright, after you do this, come over here and remove the vent from the transfer case. And then there's going to be fuel lines that come across the top of the transmission right here, and it's going to be secured with a little flap right there. Loosen that and then pop the lines up, and then get the flap underneath it so it doesn't snap back in place. There you go. Next thing you're going to want to do is remove the cross member underneath the transfer case. So get your transmission jack and support the pan. It's a plastic pan, so be careful with it. And if you're doing this on the floor at home, on the garage floor, I would get some tall, like 6-ton jack stands, and that will get it higher up off the ground. And then you can get a transmission jack with a transmission head on it. It kind of looks like a floor jack from Harbor Freight. You can use that to grab onto the transmission. So once you have the transmission supported with a jack, come on back here and get a 18mm wrench on the nuts for the cross member, and then get your impact with a 15mm and remove the nuts and bolts from the cross member. They're on each side. And then you have 21mm or 18s on certain models holding the cross member up to the transmission mount in the middle. Then after that, you should be able to pry the cross member out of there. My transmission jack is being used by someone, so I'll see you in an hour and a half after lunch. Well, I'm doing something else before lunch. It's going to be an hour lunch, but see you then. Hello, I'm back from lunch. The transmission jack's still not available, so just yeah, like once you get the pan supported and get the cross member out, just the next step will be just getting the starter out of the way and this ground. The ground is 13mm nut, and then that stud behind it, and then there's two 13mm studs holding the starter on. And on the other side, there, on certain models, you'll have a rubber plug right here on the driver's side of the transmission to access the torque converter nuts. But on this one, you access the converter nuts through the starter hole. There's going to be a little rubber shield that you have to take out behind the starter to access the nuts. But yeah, go ahead and take your starter out and the ground and the stud right here, and get a ratchet on the crankshaft pulley, harmonic balancer, and turn it over. There should be 4 torque converter nuts. Turn it over until you get access all 4 of them. Remove the nuts, and I'll get back with you when you're done. Warning, I misspoke. Before you put the jack underneath the pan, you're going to want to get a twist stand. If you're on a lift, or if you're on the ground, just get a regular car jack, come under the back of the transfer case, support it at the transfer case, not at the pan first. That'll give you room to get the exhaust out. So putting the jack under the pan comes last when you're getting ready to drop the transmission out. So support the transfer case, get the cross member out, then get the exhaust out, which I'll show you how to do. I'm taking the torque converter nuts off. This is my ratchet setup right here. With my right hand, I'm turning the engine over while with my left hand I'm feeling for the next torque converter nut up here to access. Okay. I've got the cross member off. I have the transfer case supported before removing the cross member. Like I said, don't worry about supporting the pan until you're ready to come out with the transmission. I misspoke there. You're going to need the room without the jack in the way to get the exhaust out. So anyway, yeah, I do have the cross member out. I have removed all 4 torque converter nuts, rotating the engine over 90 degrees each time to get to the next one. And next, you're going to want to remove your mount here off the transfer case. First step of that, remove that bolt, 15 millimeter. It'll come off of the upper portion of this insulator here for the exhaust. So take that off, and then on each side there's 2 black bolts, 15 millimeter. 2 right there, 2 right up in there. Okay, then you'll be able to get the mount out, and it is directional. You have to put it in the same way. All right. I put it in the cross member to keep it oriented the right way. Next, pull the exhaust out. All right, this one's different than usual. No, it's not. Okay, at the end of the Y pipe, there's 2 13 millimeter bolts holding it to the muffler pipe. Remove those 2 bolts and come forward, and on each of the flanges on the exhaust manifold there's 2 nuts, 15 millimeter. One's right there. You can't see it, but you may want to spray penetrating oil on it, and you'll want to get a long 3/8 extension and a mid-deep 15 millimeter swivel socket. I want to say that's a 3-foot extension. That'll get it out for you. And do make sure that this rear O2 is out of the shield here on this side, so it doesn't cut the wires. And then you'll, when all that's loose, you'll grab the exhaust facing this direction, grab onto the cats with each hand, jiggle it forward, pull it down, and route the back of it over the frame and through the top of the harness here, and you'll be out with it. This one is difficult to get to, the upper one on the passenger side. Here's how I did it. I just got a drip of transmission fluid in my hair. So here's the extension on top of the cat on the right side of the O2. Feel around, put it on the nut with your left hand. Okay, well, that was one heck of a chore, but that's out of there. I had one of the studs back off on the manifold for it. If that happens to you, just make sure the threads are in good condition. This is where the stud backed out. Should be a stud in there like that. But anyway, so next, what you're going to want to do is remove the wiring from the transmission. There's a retainer there and towards the back, also up in there. And make sure there's no wires up over here, which there will be like right here. And I believe that's it. Just double check that you get the vent hose off the transfer case. Then disconnect the bulkhead connector, the red tab on it. Slide the red tab, slide the tab back with a pick, and it's not focusing. Slide the red tab back with a pick, push down on the black portion here, and then you'll be able to slide the lever back and it'll come off. And then disconnect the wiring to the transfer case. and get the retainers out of the transfer case. Basically prep the transfer case for removal. Alright, so once you finish that, go ahead and get your transmission jack under there. Preferably it's not like mine and leaks all over the place. Support it by the pan, and after that you can remove your stand supporting the transfer case or jack, whatever you're using, and then come back here, lower the transfer case down onto this there we go, frame support here. That's just the seal protector, that's not the seal itself. Then you'll be able to access all of the inverted Torx 14 fasteners all the way around and holding the transfer case to the transmission. Once you get those bolts loose, there's another one there, raise the transmission back up, slide the transfer case off with a helper. Ow! And then you'll raise the transmission back up, put the transfer case over top of this brace here if you have it on your vehicle, and then tilt it and then move it down, pivot it under the tail shaft of the transmission. So once again, once you get the bolts loose, raise this up, slide this back over on top of here, tilt it, and then drop it out. Alright, with that transfer case out of the way, you can see more of what you need to take off as far as wiring. There's the flap I was talking about earlier. You can see with the flap back down, it's not going to have the stuff fall back in it. Anyway, there's this O2 wire right here that I mentioned earlier to disconnect. Then on this side, you still have the junction for wiring right here that is held on right here. Right, you see it. A little black tab needs to be squeezed and pushed up. Same with this one up here. And then you'll be ready for the bell housing bolts. So get those wires out of the way. Okay, go ahead and lower the transmission back down when the harness is out of the way. Keep it supported a little bit. Alright, now get those two upper bell housing bolts right at the top there. You see them? Just holding that bracket on. Get that same long 3-foot extension you had earlier and use a swivel 13 to get those off. And then after that, well, I'll show you after that. Okay, after you take the upper two bell housing bolts out, raise the transmission back up about level-ish like that. Install a safety strap, ratchet strap to the transmission. Hold it to the jack so it doesn't fall off, and then go around and get the rest of your bell housing bolts all the way around. Don't forget about the one on the bottom here. Alright, so after you get the last few bell housing bolts, it'll start separating from the engine, and there is a 13mm bell housing stud here and on top right here, and that's by the starter, just so you don't forget that. It's kind of hard to see them. But after that, jiggle it the transmission back. Go on the other side, make sure the studs on the torque converter went through. You don't want to have the torque converter stuck, it'll leak everywhere. And mine separated. Slowly rock your way back. You need both hands. Okay, I appreciate you watching. Please subscribe for lots more videos like this. Let's see, when you go back in with it, make sure the torque converter studs are aligned the same orientation. That way it'll slide through the holes in the flywheel. That's about everything I can think to tell you. Appreciate you watching.